era. Yeah.
And everybody, it is Oz Property Investors on a Wednesday night. You bring the big names and we have the big fun. How you going, Nick?
Good, mate.
I was trying to say about 15 different things there. So, yeah, I'm really good, actually. I'm loving this fantastic weather. It's going to be like 45 degrees tomorrow. Not really. It's going to be 29, but I love summer. So how good is it? And then back to 15 or 16 next week. So as soon as we get out of lockdown, the weather just going to turn garbage, and I'm not going to be out because I'm not. You are, Joe, because you've got your upgrade, so good on you. So how are you going?
We're in Cronulla. We got sun, we got beaches, we got a great place here. So we're getting out and about, 100%.
Sun, sand, and surf. It's very appropriate for given the lifeguard analogy we've got. He's protecting your property.
I went a bit crazy with that analogy, didn't I? With the whole lifesaver thing. But that's the thing with property managers. I'm really excited about this one. Property managers, the money is in the management, like I said, and not enough investors are taking advantage of that. So I think we're in for a bit of a treat here. But should we kick into life hacks? I think we should. I'm going to say
before
yes.
we do, we want to see lots of questions, lots of comments. And lots of likes. Just I don't know. I know there's heaps of people who are going to be watching and interested to learn about property management. I know even Charlie and Bianca Vela, they set up date night tonight. So we're bringing your relationship. Remember that comment, Jack? But how are you doing, Joey? We didn't ask you how you were. That's the most important part of the show. We're going to ask everybody how they are.
Well, I'm fantastic, mate. I'm fantastic. I'm excited. I'm ready to rock.
Let's do life hacks then. So I think we should let our guest go first. He's got a cracking one.
Yeah. I have two actually. One's a property one, and one's a.
Oh, okay.
Something. I just said to the guys, get ready to save tens of maybe dozens of dollars a year, on your toothpaste by whacking a bulldog clip on the end of it. There, this is a pretty old fashioned one. I'm pretty sure if you Google it, it's like the second one that comes up. But we've been doing it for so long, I forgot it was even there. I think the bulldog clip is rusting, so it's been there forever.
Haven't you brushed your teeth?
Sorry?
No, you probably no.
He changes. Oh, right. He changes the toothpaste, not the bulldog clip. That's quite the strategy. I love that. We were joking about property managers and being able to squeeze the juice out of everything. So it was quite...
Yeah. But the other one I did have was there was a property one that I thought of as well, that if there's property managers on this live, they'll know what I'm talking about. Probably a lot of times not actually, but there's one in particular, which is bathrooms, right? Tenants and putting exhaust fans on. Okay, ventilation is huge in bathrooms, every bathroom, right? Here's what you do. You don't have the exhaust on a separate switch. Okay, you either shower in the dark or you put the exhaust on with the light. Okay, so get your Sparky to put the exhaust on with the light. Okay, and the heat. Only those two things.
So that's to save money, is it, or is it what's the?
It's to get ventilation going because it stops mold. It stops issues like that. If you don't put fans on in bathrooms over time, you get huge mold issues, and mold scares the absolute crap out of property managers and everyone else. So it's a big thing. Moisture, it's sitting there in bathrooms is terrible for hygiene.
That's a fantastic one.
Particularly. But you
and
want
it
them
saves you money.
The exhaust. Particularly if you can't rely on open windows and stuff, put the exhaust on. It's the simplest thing. It works very well.
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic life hack. I did that on my most recent property, not because I thought about that, but because the Sparky said, look, it's going to be cheaper. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Yeah. But
even
he then said the ancillary benefit is there's no matter what, the fan has to go on because some people don't like having the fan on. And that's a personal preference. But I don't want their personal preference to mold up my house. So
absolutely.
It's on. Okay, that's really good.
I'm like Donkey Kong. So I want to say the best to last, so I'll go up next because mine's one is one that I think is very important and underrated because we know how we all send a whole bunch of emails and we don't actually know how long ago we may have sent those emails. So a little trick that I've got is as soon as I BCC in myself and then I snooze the email so that to come back up in a week's time if the person hasn't replied. So if somebody hasn't replied, I literally am like, okay, well I need to do that because we all have so many things to do. So it comes back in a week and you're like, you haven't got a response. You hit reply and say, hey, Joe, hey, Jess, hey, Josephine, I haven't got a reply or how's it going? How are we going with this? And you don't even have to remember to think about it. It happens automatically. So automate your life. You don't have to keep a list. So
that's a fantastic one. That's awesome. I mean,
that is great.
Yeah. That's actually better than you were playing it down. Now my life hack's a bit crap compared to that one. That one works. I'm all for it. Okay, cool. Well, let's jump into my one. So my one is an app called Slack. And I work for a technology company at the moment, and Slack I feel like is just bread and butter. It's every business should have Slack built in. And what is it? It's an instant messaging app, and it's how you communicate between staff members, especially now that we're remote. So if you don't have Slack, check it out. Do you have Slack, Nick?
Actually, my wife, who usually sits in the other half of this office I'm sitting in here, uses Slack every day for her lab group, and I constantly hear it going tuk 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 in the background.
It's very annoying. It's very annoying. But we've got this.
She thinks it's great.
It's fantastic. We've got this group, right? We've got 10,000 people here, and there's a bit of admin that requires to cut these videos up, and we've got awesome people that help us do that, and we communicate with the whole team remotely at home. Here, can you cut this video up? Here, can you do this? Boom, 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 all done one place. So if you want to centralize all of the information for your entire business, just put it in there, and you can then zap things. Use Zapier, which is another life hack. But anyway, if you're actually interested in that, I'm happy to have a chat with someone offline about it, but get it done in your business, whatever that is. Maybe I can get a commission. I don't know. How does this stuff work? Just
send him a Slack. He'll respond. I promise. We're gonna have something new and exciting next week, because I think we've killed the life hacks. I'm just over coming up with them every week. So.
I'm done with life hacks.
Yep.
I'm done with life hacks.
Anymore. Yeah.
We're not hacking it anymore.
Yep. Sorry. I thought it was all right. I put a full
stop
on
it. No. Fantastic. It was the last one, the best last one. So I'm very happy with that. Okay, so we're about to introduce this fantastic Nick man. Who is this guy? But first, let's jump into our first sponsor for the day, and then we'll jump straight into it. Let's talk about commercial property investing. It's one of those areas that confuses many people, probably because of the risks involved, but it's also one of the few asset classes that can give you a very positive cash flow from day one. With commercial property, you get some massive net yields of 6 to 10%. Now, that's not gross, that's net, which means it's cash in your pocket. This is what makes them so amazing. Your property can actually pay itself off within 10 years, grow in value, and without having you to chip in any cash at all. Now, with big rewards comes some big risk, which is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. The way you do this is with expert due diligence. This is why we highly recommend hiring professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. He is one of Australia's top commercial property buyer's agent. With his own multi-million-dollar property portfolio of a mix of commercial and residential, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers, finding the best properties in the best location, along with the ways to avoid the dud properties. Steve has even been the one to write the book on commercial property investing in Australia, and it's a bestseller. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount to our audience of 50% with the code OZPROP. Click the link below, get a copy today, and start your commercial property investing journey.
Well done, Joe. Mate. That was seamless. How good are we? So that was but Nick, before we get into introducing you, I wanted to say thank you for coming on, because it is a big commitment to come on. I know you were answering questions or preparing a lot of content for this, so good on you for doing that as well. So thanks but what I wanted to intro you is you've been advising, so I'll give you a pump up here. This is your pump up. So if I've missed anything, then it's not my fault, I promise. You've been advising investors across residential, commercial, retail assets for nearly your whole career. So 20 years, so amazing sort of experience, big and small, everything in between. So you've won a couple of awards. I want to ask you a question about that and feature on a couple of panels, conferences. So is there anything you haven't done, I suppose? But you run your own boutique property manager business. You're part of the Coronis Network, New South Wales director, to help other property managers do the same thing and try to be good at it. So I think you've undersold yourself there. But what is the favorite award that you've won throughout your career?
Oh, that's it. What kind of question is that?
I don't know. How many awards have you won?
Oh, not that many, mate. Jeez, take it easy.
Give me a couple.
Look, I don't know. It was nice to the better thing about those awards things, like the best thing about those is talking to other people who do what you do. Like, that's the best stuff. Like the reason that like you apply for awards, I think in my industry anyway, is to try to see what you've done well and what you haven't done as well, and sort of it gives you a way of like retrospective, looking at things you've done and things you haven't done, and it makes you think, I could have done that a bit better, I could have done that a bit better. Like winning the thing is cool, but it's not sort of, it's not the
not about the winning, it's about the journey, isn't it?
It is, and it's great. And the places that those awards sort of took place in, some of those associations I've been a part of and stuff I've just met really good people. I mean, the people I work with now, certainly the director of Cronus now in Australia, Jodie Staten's a fantastic lady, and we only know each other because of those kinds of events, over the years. And it's really like those kinds of things are great. And that's how you learn stuff, so you just try to, it's trying to just get better at stuff, really, isn't it? Like, hopefully.
I'm all for it. Sorry, Jeff. Go on, mate.
No, I was going to say, I'm sort of looking forward to potentially some events happening, and there's been noise that people want events of us, but we'll see how we go. I don't know. It's a lot of organising. I'm not sold. we may have an Oz property one of these days. But go on, Joe. What were you going to say?
Yeah, well, if we get all 10,000 in a room together, we might fill up a football stadium or something. So if we can organise that, then maybe it's worthwhile setting it up and saying hello. Anyway, I'm interested about you, Nick, but I want to wheel it all back, because you're not just a property manager, not just a property manager either, but you're also a property investor.
I am a property investor, yeah.
Property investor as well. You've been a member of this group for since it began, really, from what I remember.
He created this group, Joe. Isn't Nick and Jeff the same person, are we? I mean, yeah.
Someone had to. But okay, so I want to wheel it back and understand your kind of investor story. Like maybe property management came first, or maybe investing came first. How did you get into property?
Yeah, well, I'm the son of a real estate agent, which has probably explained some things. But I got sort of the end of school and didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. And my old man said, look, I reckon you'd probably like this. And being a young bloke that sort of is inclined to rebel against what his parents do, I wasn't necessarily pumped about it. But it turns out it kind of grew on me. But when I bought my first property in 2008, it was basically my old man said, a property's come up, Nick, and I think you should buy it. And I went, really? And I went, okay. And he goes, it's 139,950. It's a unit, Campbelltown, southwest Sydney. I think you should buy it.
Yeah.
I went, do you reckon I can get it for 135? Which part of
Campbelltown? Can I ask which part of Campbelltown?
It was an established unit. I've still own it now. It's an established unit it's just it crosses near where Broughton Street and Moore Street cross over.
Okay.
It's kind of just slightly north of Campbelltown. It's basically the CBD, not very far, or the edge of the CBD.
Yep.
And I said, do you reckon I can get it for 135? And Dad looked at me and said, just buy it. So I went, okay. But it was probably one of the better bits of advice he's ever given me, actually. And he's given me a lot of good advice. That was a particularly good one. So that was the first property I bought. And I've had a couple since then. I haven't sold anything, so I bought a couple since then. I bought in 2008, 2012. I got a place in Bradbury, not far away from Campbelltown, and built a granny flat on it, and bought another place a bit further north in Edmonds Park.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, how have they performed? If you're buying a unit in Campbelltown at 139,000, probably pretty good.
Doesn't sound like much, does it? Good back now. It felt like a lot at the time. But you look back and you go, geez, I wish I bought 5 of them. I was, I think I was 22 or 23 or something at the time. And I think I just bought that. I lived in it for a bit. I think it's doubled in a bit in that time. I think it's in fact, a friend of mine, an agent down that way, just messaged me and said he sold the property next door to mine, literally 2 days ago. And the unit next door to my unit. And it's performed outrageously well. So I thought, that's a good bump to the valuation.
How much did it sell for you?
Sorry? Oh, that one sold for 230.
230 was it?
330.
330. Geez, man, that's close to, that's 2.5. Maybe
Yeah,
sort of,
it's pretty good. The funny thing is, most of the growth happened in about 2009-10. Like, it happened really quickly. Like, that's a big chunk of growth happened then. I went from sort of worth 140 to about 180 in about 6 months, like 12 months. It was really quite quick. So, and that, not really expected, to be fair. But there was one who sold a week before at auction at like 127,500. Like, it was fertile ground, I can tell you. But I wasn't a young bloke with this X amount of money. I didn't really have a lot to spend, so I sort of bought that at the time. But it was, and it's been a great little unit. It's been a really great performer, very steady for a long time. And I've, it's one of those wonderful investments that you nearly forget you own. It goes that smoothly. It's great. Yeah, so that was really good. The Parkway I bought mainly to live in for a bit, really, but I also bought it as a bit of a renovation project with my girlfriend, now wife. And we sort of did lots of fun stuff there, discovered how to bugger up some doors and how to bugger up some other things, because I like just trying to do stuff, which as a property manager, I heartily recommend against. But it was because we lived in it. It was like, well, it can be our practice house. We can mess things up and learn what not to do.
Practice house. How do you mess up a door?
How do you not mess up a door is a better question.
Actually, that's very true.
Doors are deceptively hard to install on an older house. I can tell you, $30-40, because the frames all move. Everything's slightly out. So you've got to plane the crap out of it to make it work. It's not straightforward.
And this is the funny thing, that people think that doors are just one size, and it's just, you just go to Bunnings, you buy a door, and then you put it against the thing, and you're like, it doesn't do the thing.
Yeah, rectangles don't fit into a rhombus, mate. That's not how it works. So that was interesting, but
that was the second one. That was your PPOR. Are you still at that place now?
No, I'm in Evanston Park now. I'm further north. So but that one in Bradbury ended up being the granny flat project I did a few years after that. And I didn't buy it intending to do that, which looking back is a bit strange because it's a perfect block for it. But I really wasn't planning to do it, but it worked out pretty well. It was a sort of a big block, a sort of substantial frontage. And sort of it had all the right ingredients. And I was, as I was doing it, like we were renovating, I was doing projects for clients where I was working at the time, helping them do the same thing within that sort of sphere. And it was like, I ended up going home one day and saying, Kate, oh man, this is ridiculous, but we have to do this here. I know we've got other plans to do things here, but we should do this because it's too good a money to say no to. Like, it just works too well. So it was, it ended up working quite nicely for us in the end. And the returns are 12, 13, 14%, very low risk. And it was like, well, it just worked, So I was comfortable doing it because I'm when you're in it, you're going in with less discomfort about it, So it was an easy thing. We'll
touch on the granny flat stuff. I think towards the end, because I think you've got so much value to add for that. It would be great to learn about how the process works if you've got the time. So what about the third one? What did that look like? Did you how quickly in succession did you buy these? Were you like an avid property investor saying, I'm going to buy?
2012, and what was the third one?
Yeah, only a couple of years ago, I bought Evanston Park. We sort of weren't, we wanted to, we had our little fella coming and sort of, it was more of a family decision, that one. So that's where I'm sitting now in our place in Evanston Park. And it's sort of, that was a more carefully considered family long-term purchase, that one. So we, knowing that we've sort of got, and that's how it's kind of progressed. And it's also, it's a pattern, I suppose, that I did copy from a couple of early mentors of mine professionally. They'd done similar things. And I thought, well, that's worked really well. And I think paying attention to people who do good stuff effectively and sort of doing what they do works pretty well when you do it, accurately and follow good people. I've had good teachers in my professional life, I think, as well. So it's kind of been helpful.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go. I was just going to say, in one or two sentences, what were the couple of things that those mentors taught you about investing?
Yeah, well, I think, both my old man, who's an investor and obviously an agent for a long time, was very helpful in this way. Being in property is, makes you very comfortable going in that direction. But certainly my early, my first kind of, I guess, professional manager, my first boss, I suppose, when I worked in commercial property for a number of years. I'd love to talk to Steve Police about that stuff. I think it's fascinating what he does. She was a great, wonderful teacher about just, she retired at 50 and she said, I've got a plan to retire at 50 and this is how I'm going to do it. And she's been she was very clear about it, did exactly that. And I thought, gee, that's good. Like, that's very clever how that's done. Not that that's what I want to do, but it was, she basically sort of had done several, not exactly what I've done, but she's done similar things. And her basic advice was, don't sell stuff, Nick. Like, don't sell things, man. And any investor in my, that I'm close to in my life, personally and professionally, are just people who don't sell their properties. And I don't want to make out that you should never sell. I know that's a different discussion for another day, but it's, I'm very disinclined to sell. And I think moments like we're in now, I just was talking to my old man today, actually, funny about something entirely differently. And we just mentioned that, like, now is not the time to be selling stuff. You want to, now's the time to be hanging on and taking the gains, or buying more stuff and there's opportunities rather than, turning around and selling and cashing out necessarily if you don't have to so I've just been that's kind of the investment culture I've been in, so to speak. I think I'd probably, but that was one thing. And my old man is just very, he's a big fan of doing things properly, preparing properly and doing, do the, he ran he's a great very good salesperson and ran a traditional agency, a small traditional agency for about 20 or 30 years in the end. And sort of his attitude professionally and personally in investment was to sort of, and still is, to do everything properly. If there's a maintenance item, do it properly, get good fixtures, get good trades, get the, do everything really well and sort of make sure you don't half do something. And I think that's a really important thing. And I do professionally now, I think that way too, but it's more that I think just from an investment point of view, it was like, if you make sensible decisions, you'll end up in a really good position and you won't have to do too much, it was really very much about a low risk environment.
What are some of the non-good things that you see people going out there, the non-properly things that you see investors making mistakes on? Because I'm definitely not a victim, a perpetrator of some of the things you're probably going to talk about, because I've done some bad things in my investing day. Not morally bad, but like poor decisions. But what are some of the poor decisions that haven't, when you don't do something properly, come back to bite an investor?
Look, where do you start? There's 40 of them, really. But I think really most of it comes down to poor preparation, just preparing badly. So if you're going to put a property on the market for lease, if you're lucky enough to have time's really critical. Like, if you've got time, then you can make measured decisions about things. And that's when you can make sure your compliance is right. You can solidify the property. You can walk around the property and say, well, what shakes and moves? How can I solidify those up with really rock solid fixtures that aren't going to fall apart quickly? And how can I make sure my kitchen's right, my drawers go in and out okay, and just like really minutiae things. Because one of the things that changes when you have a property and a tenant moves into it is, particularly if you've lived there like I have in properties that I've invested in, the tenant will live there differently than you have or anyone else has. And instead of putting up with something, they'll jump on the phone and say, hey, Nico, fix this, pal, could you? Because I'm paying rent for this and you should fix it. So it's not, they won't think I'll just deal with it or put up with it. And they have every right to not put up with it, So it's that kind of thing. And I think really not getting terrible landlord insurance. I know I've carried on about this in the group a bit, I think. a bit.
Right. Okay, hang on. Terrible landlord insurance. I thought you just kind of get the landlord insurance and it's done.
We said we weren't going to talk about this, but I think we are now. Joe's going to bring it up because you did a session with Pizza.
Well, because I've probably got terrible landlord insurance.
I've got not to mention names, but I got Amy, so I'm sure. And I haven't read the PDS and all that, so I mean I don't know.
Look, tell us about. I think, and this is not. Can I tell you? It's not. I hope when I say this, for any property managers that are listening to this, that I'm pretty confident when I say this. I'm speaking for many, many, many property managers in the country, in that we tend to be at the front lines of when things go badly, and you see lots and lots of claims all the time, and you see lots of claims from lots of different insurers, and you see patterns emerging, and you see large insurers, big bulk, large guys that don't do a lot of landlord insurance, but create a product for it. And where they exploit their database full of, people that buy their stuff and they say, "Oh, just take this on the end, and we'll get some extra cash." It's a revenue service, for that insurer, and their product, because it's not a regulated product, right? If you get comprehensive car insurance, there are certain things that has to have in it, according to the there's laws about this, right? In property landlord insurance, there isn't really, certainly not comparative, and that means that they can be a lot more fast and loose with what you're paying for it. And what I tend to say to clients is it's not an expensive insurance. It really isn't. And if you're paying 450, good policies are usually in the 400s thereabouts, right? For a year. And bad policies might be 300 or 350. But the thing is, they're worth like a globe, I can tell you, or close to it. And there's no point in having insurance that doesn't pay. There's no point in insurers, and particularly, again, I don't want to dominate this discussion with this because it's a bugbear of mine, and it really concerns me how little investors know about it. But it's or worse, they use property managers like insurance, which we're not. So it's kind of like there are products within it, particularly about indemnity and about damage and about arrears. Right, those are two dominant reasons you have landlord insurance. The tenants, the unintended damage the tenant can't pay for, and when they don't pay, all right, on an extended level, something happens and it just doesn't go right. One of the things that poor policies will do is they'll avoid paying for either malicious or accidental, or there'll be minutiae there that they won't cover, and that stuff really annoys me because that's why you've got it. It shouldn't matter how it happened. It should matter that it happened and it wasn't the landlord's fault and the tenant had something to do with it. That's all that really matters. And the good insurers don't care. They just cover you for this stuff, and that's kind of the, as long as you can substantiate it and go through it properly, because there's the other thing too. If you don't document it properly, if you don't have leases in place, if you don't take bond, if you don't do all these sets of things, then it's not going to be compliant, So all that stuff's really important. And landlord insurance is like, I say to clients all the time, it's the green slip of property investment. You just get it annually and pay for it. And it pays you back in spades. I just did a claim the other day for a client, and it just was smooth as butter because it was one of the excellent insurers that knows how this works. The specialist insurers do this every day. That's all they do. And they understand.
Are we talking like we don't want to kind of name. We don't want to try and avoid naming names. We're talking like the Terry Shears. Is it the EBMs or is it EBM? Are they the kind of specialist insurers?
EBM is underwritten by QBE, and I think Terry Shear is underwritten by Suncorp, I think now. But they are they're the two big ones that people think about in my industry, certainly. But there are other great ones too. Realty Protect's really good. Property Insurance Plus is quite good. There's a few other good ones, but it's probably half a dozen pretty decent ones. But the thing is that, so I don't want to be seen as favouring just one or the other, but there's a bunch of pretty reasonable ones. But the point is, they're all specialists, and that's. The substance in those policies is so much better. And when stuff hits the ceiling, that's what you're going to be reaching for, because you're going to say to your property manager, just get all that money from that tenant. And we'll say something like, well, blood doesn't come out of stones, so we've got to figure out a different way here, and that's kind of, insurance is there to stop you having to go through this marathon ridiculous process to get your money. It's there to help you, cover those circumstances. And it's a wonderful safety net, really. It really reduces the risk of property investment so substantially, and if you can why not do it? I mean, it's such a small amount of money to give you that sort of huge buffer. That's so effective.
So speaking of safety nets and property and landlord insurance and all these kind of, I think there was actually some really good things you mentioned there around bond and all those. And these are all, there's a whole bunch of sort of really cool things. What I want to get into, and I promised people would save them tens of thousands and make them all that money. I think from doing that, those are some of the tips and tactics. But let's get into the meat and potatoes. Let's get into how do you actually pick a property manager? Like, I know you're a property manager, so of course you got the property manager hat on. So we've talked a little bit about self-management. What are the 3 to 5 things people should do when they're picking a property manager? What are those questions they should ask?
Yeah, there's probably half a dozen common ones that are good to ask. Certainly things like how many properties that you manage. How many properties do individuals manage? Explain to me the structure of your department. How exactly does it work? Who's going to be doing the tasks? Who's actually going to do it? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be someone else? Who is it? What qualifies them to do it? Like what's their go? How does this work? What's your arrears rate? How many are your tenants paying on time?
So hang on, just going back to that. So you're talking about how many properties does somebody manage? How many is too many? How many is not enough? How many is an overloaded poor sucker that has to deal with 800, 900 properties? What does it look like?
I've got some friends in the industry that I think are in this group that might be on this call that'll be thinking, oh, this is a question, this one. But I think, sometimes it's how long's a piece of string, unfortunately. But I think really what you're looking at is the worst situations. I want to say that the situation that is bad you do see in the industry a lot is that you see a property manager who has no help, who manages about 250 properties themselves. Okay, that is a proverbial storm of feces right there. That's not. What's going to happen is if you've got 250 properties, maybe 220 clients, you're not serving them. You're just not. You can't.
Yeah.
Just firefighting. And that's one of the issues with scale agencies. Now, typically, it might be a little bit less than that. You might have 170, 180 with a property manager that has a bit of help. So you might have a senior property manager. You might have an assistant that does maintenance, and you might have a leasing person who deals with the office leasing generally. And they might spread the tasks out. It's what we call a pod system in property management. So that's quite a popular method of dealing with it at a lot of scale agencies, a lot of larger agencies. But those sort of structures are what should interest you if you're going to sign an agency agreement with an agent, is just having an understanding of it. I don't want to be seen to, I run a boutique agency now, but I've certainly run departments in big agencies. I've been a part of an excellent agency in Southwest Sydney that's quite large. So I don't want to favor a particular thing, but understand what is happening, because if you're going to make a decision about it, you're starting a relationship. This is not buying a Mars bar at a 7-Eleven. It's a relationship you're starting, and it might have a lot to do with what happens to your money in the next number of years. It's really important stuff. But I think rather than just those questions, like how many properties, have you got into arrears? Are you sort of 97% of them paying on time, and 96% of them paying on time? Anything less than about 90, I'd say, is trouble, frankly. But if you're going to, how many properties have you got that are currently under tribunal at the moment? There are a court matter pending on at the moment. How many of your guys are tied up with a tribunal matter that's taking up all your time? Great property managers don't tend to go to tribunal much, because they're good problem solvers. They stop things escalating. They're able to deal with those issues.
Or they just realise that they're probably going to lose at tribunal, so they don't bother.
Yeah. Well, sometimes owners will force them to go when they don't want to, against their recommendation too, which is worse. So there's those issues too. But I think probably stepping back from the questions you asked the property manager, probably one of the things that I think as a PM that all PMs really would like from people is for them to know what they want. Because I've sat in front of thousands of property managers that have just bought a property. And the first question I might ask is, congratulations on your purchase, for argument's sake. Tell me why you bought this property. And sometimes I get crickets. Like just blank eyes.
Don't they say to make money though? Isn't that the point of buying? I mean,
that's right.
It's not just to make money, of course.
So just consider someone makes a $500,000 purchase and doesn't really know why. That's sort of like a bit of a worry in itself, because property investors, particularly like now and maybe back in sort of 2012 and some of the consecutive years, 2001, 2, that sort of stuff, they're like lemmings. They just kind of race after each other, a lot of the time. And I'd have people sitting in front of me that just don't entirely know why they bought what they just bought, and it scares the life out of me to some degree. But understand what you want. When I say understand what you want, set some KPIs. If you're asking questions about a property manager and they seem like they're going to be pretty good, then say, right, I need to tell this person what is going to make me happy and what's going to upset me. Just lay down some KPIs about what I expect from this relationship. And you might not have all the knowledge about what's going to happen. But
what kind of KPIs are we talking?
Well, I think a measure of integrity is doing what you say you're going to do. So I tend to, when I employ trades or I go to someone, I say, look, I don't mind if you can or can't do this. I don't mind. All I really want is if you say something to me that you're going to do, I just want you to do it. I'll be upset if you don't do what you say you're going to do. That's what I'll be upset with, That's one of my little bugbears, with people that do work for me. And those are the kinds of things you want. You say, look, I'm going to be upset if you don't get back to me in 48 hours when I'm trying to chase you for something, And if they go, well, I'll definitely get back to you via email or this, blah, 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 blah. And if you're a scale agent, maybe they're a little bit worried about how much they can get back to you and how quickly they can get back to you. And maybe that's a bit of a trigger to say, well, this agent might not be the right one for you. They might not be a bad agent, but the structure of that agency might not be what you want. You know, you might want them to be more hands-on. My clients want more of me. You know, that's why they choose me to do the job. But that might be less hands-on. Every investor is different, you know, on what they want. But just understand what it is that will annoy you and what won't annoy you, and it will set the relationship up better. And you won't get surprised by things. And you'll be able to say, if this didn't happen later, you won't appear in a group like this one saying, what happened with my property manager was blah, 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 blah. You can just say, look, you can ring them up and say, look, I'm upset because we talked about this and you're doing something else. And I'm upset because of it. I mean, is that fair? You know? In other words, just be vocal about it.
Classic expectation management. Like you manage what's important to you, and if that's not, you sort of set out the guidelines to how you kind of rectify it. And that's one of the mistakes. I don't know if you made this mistake, Joey, but with my first property manager I didn't, and I still probably could do a little better. I didn't actually sort of say, well, here's what would I didn't go through the points that Nick did. And subsequently, when the property manager the principal stopped kind of doing the main jobs, he handed off to other people who weren't as good as him. It then sort of went down the path of I just got frustrated, and eventually I changed changed agencies. That was the consequence. But
that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's also good to understand the type of business that you're getting involved in as well, because what you're talking about here, Nick, what you do is a boutique agency, right? Or boutique, however you want to say it. And there's also those type of real estate agents that have a sales organization behind it. And then they also have generally a franchise operation where it's property management and sales. So why did you go down the boutique path, and what are some of the key differences that people should be aware of?
Yeah, and I don't want to slip into here's why you should use someone like me and not someone like me. I don't want to go for that path. The reason I chose to do this mainly is that I've worked for large agencies probably my whole career, actually, aside from the last few years doing my own thing. But probably couple of reasons. One is that I found that certain challenges that you had at a scale agency were nearly always going to be out of reach in terms of a solution under that model. And because you're relying on a lot of moving parts to function correctly. And you can outsource, you can get great tech, and you can do all these really wonderful things. But some people are going to be sacrificed in that model, always. Some clients, some tenants, someone's not going to be treated well because you're every time you're working at scale, there's going to be spoilage. You know, there's a portion that is just not going to function the way that it's supposed to function. And that really kind of irritated me, particularly when I was a business development manager and I was sort of selling the property management product to people a lot. And I think the more I went through that, the more I thought, I don't think this is the future of my industry. I think we are going to get really big scale stuff, and the investors who maybe don't care quite so much about the minutiae, and that's okay. But the better way of operating, in my view, was to have tight control on each portfolio that you manage for each individual client. Because what I wanted to be able to say to clients is that when you talk to me, you're talking to the person who is doing every single thing. Every single thing that's happening to your property, I am doing it. I'm not outsourcing a single thing. That doesn't mean I don't use great tech, because I do, but I don't outsource the jobs. You know, I'm the one that you're buying for this. I'm the product of my organization. You know,
because the other model that there is where you have a BDM, like what your job was previously before, and what that person's role is to go out there and source all of these properties. They're to go onto Facebook groups and say, hey, I'm a property manager, I can help you out. Then they have a conversation and then they sell that. And then there are a team of people that manage all the minutiae and all the admin stuff, and they generally get that lead and they're like, oh God, another one. This is rubbish. I don't know who this person is. I don't know what they're all about.
A successful BDM is a property manager's nightmare.
So it's a challenge. But if you can go in there and have that more hands-on approach, you know exactly who you're dealing with. Because I've had this where I've loved the BDM. The BDM was the best person ever. And then I signed on the dotted line, and then I emailed her and she's like, no, you're dealing with this person now. And I'm like, but who is this person? I don't like her anymore. I like you. Come back.
I have to say some of the awards I have won have been to do with business development, and I would say in that instance, Joe, they probably didn't set your expectations correctly as to what was going to happen next. And that was probably the thing there. So there's a little bit of a gap in expectation management of that process. But I think you're right, and I don't look, as I said before, the bulk of my work as a BDM was done excellent. I can't say enough good things about the agent that I worked with, and I have a great affection for them, and particularly my director at that business, who is one of the smartest guys in the industry. I've got so much time for him. I just think that the model moving forward is less of that. I think really the way I'm part of Coronis now, partly from knowing Jody Staten, I sort of went away and had a kid and sort of wanted to change my direction partly because of that belief. And now, I foster, I guess I support most of the idea of property managers who do all that work, Joe, that you're paying for, that BDM then passes on, is being done by incredibly hardworking people that by and large are not paid very well, they're not incentivized particularly well, and are kept up at night by these various, issues that come up. And, we lost something like 30% of our industry in the last 2 years, Joe, with these people getting crunched by COVID and the stresses involved. There's a financial Fin Review article about it. And it was partly, that's not to do with investors necessarily having too high expectations or anything. It's mainly to do with leadership and this structure of the way businesses work, And
it's the first in, first out. Well, last in, first out.
Yeah. And the thing is, rent rolls are a very appealing asset in real estate. They're worth a lot of money. If you build them effectively, they can give you a lot of equity in your business pretty quickly. Your sales, your cash flow is not worth asset money. So, it's really critical for so businesses, there's appeal in having a rent roll. It's got this lovely kind of solid aspect to it. But they're built scrappily, and the people maintaining them are not given enough support in the industry, generally speaking. So the reason I'm putting Coronis now is
let's take a step back to because I think this is people are probably enjoying the overview, but I suppose we've got you've got tips that you've given people to manage their help manage their property. Let's say somebody and we get this question probably about every 3 or 4 weeks about if I'm self-managing. So let's kind of, I know you're a property manager, but let's say I wanted to stop it. What are the sort of things that people should? You're quite a fair person, so what are the things they should consider if they want to self-manage?
Yeah, and before you answer that, Nick, anyone that has any questions, pop them in the comment box, right? Write down some of the questions that you've got in regards to property management, and also any kind of stories that you've got relating to property management. I've got a couple that I want to share as well.
Love stories.
Love a good story. But sorry, yes, the difference self-managing and getting a property manager. The pros and cons.
And I sort of want to say too, there's a couple of million property investors in the country, and about 70% of them at least use a property manager. So that means there's literally hundreds of thousands of people self-managing properties. So I think it's a bit silly of me to say that's a terrible idea, no one ever do it, because people do it all the time. So it's not I'm not here to sort of, advocate against that necessarily, but I think it's important to understand the landscape. And I think that's probably the thing that the owners don't necessarily understand quite well enough. So there's probably 3 things I'd say about this. It's mainly about time, knowledge, and expertise. Okay, so it's those 3 things that you got to consider when you're self-managing. How much time have you got? Because your time's worth money. Have you invested in property to spend that time and that money on that, or have you not? I think that's a question to ask yourself in that regard too. Then do you have the knowledge to do it? Do you understand what you're walking into exactly here? And that's, some people I know that self-manage, some of the groups I'm in too, that I've got some really knowledgeable and very gracious and clever self-managing people, and they do a great job, I think, for their own properties. I can see that they do a good job, and that's really great. But I think the unfortunate thing is they tend to be in the minority, and it's because of a knowledge gap. You don't know what you don't know. That's the slightly scary thing about it. In New South Wales, there's 136 pages to the Residential Tenancies Act. It's got a squillion clauses in it, and I am. Yeah, I mean, I'm an experienced person, and I reference it quite often. And in our industry groups, we talk about it often, because it's not, it's something that needs constant referencing and constant thinking about. And and then the expertise element is how do you apply that knowledge? So I think those three things are what you've got to consider if you're going to self-manage. And I don't want to make it sound scary. It's not necessarily a scary thing. It can seem very simple a lot of the time, but quite often it's when things go wrong and you sort of panic and you run to a property manager and say, here. And unfortunately, there's limited amount they can do to fix the problem because you've already burned the bridges on the way there. So it's very difficult to get out of something that goes badly when you self-manage and fix it up again. And the problem is it can turn you against property investing. I just think that's a terrible reason to be turned against your portfolio.
Yeah, 100%. And if you are a property investor, you most likely have a full-time job because you're not going to be able to afford the servicing. So if you have a full-time job, you've also got 9 to 5, which is incredibly busy, and then you probably have a family, and then you want to manage property. So would you rather 10 properties that are managed by a property manager, or would you rather 1 or 2 self-managed properties because that's all that your time capacity will allow you to do?
Yeah. And if you convert that to cash, which I think people should be paying attention to, it's really important. If you're paid,
your time,
a year, right? So if you've got, let's say, there's about 73 duties I do for each of my clients, not 73 at once, but stretched out and broadly, right? But let's say there's like 20 really critical things you've got to do, right? And they take you like an hour each per tenancy, and a tenancy goes for 6 months, and your time's worth $30 an hour. With what you do for a living, whatever it might be, conservatively, over 6 months,
probably worth a little bit more than that.
Well, there you go, right? So you might be spending
300 or 400 now,
yeah.
Maybe not.
So you might be spending $800, $900 6 months of your own time, and if you double that over 12 months, you've basically paid a property manager, to some degree, except without the knowledge, the time, or the expertise. You've just paid yourself to do it, and that's the difference there. And we don't necessarily monetize that very effectively a lot of the time. And that's where the issues tend to arise. And as I said, we don't know what we don't know. And that's always the lurking danger. And if you look at groups like this one and others, they're dotted with people that have made decisions they thought were right, but were often really badly informed decisions and based in the wrong stuff, and it just wrenches my guts. Like I want to give them a hug. Like it drives me nuts. It's really funny.
My first property experience, getting a lease. I was really gung ho. I was super pumped, and I went to this property manager that had a whole heap of experience, and I said, "This is what I want to do," and they're like, "Okay." But, and then I'm like, no, that's what we're doing. This is you haven't listed, so we had it on the market for like 2 weeks and it didn't get a listing. I'm like, Jesus, what's going on? Can you do your job? And they're like, well, yeah, we are. Obviously, I wasn't that rude. But I'm like, okay, cool. Let's incentivize these people, right? That's what we want to do. We want to incentivize people to go to the property. So what I thought was like, you know what? We'll give them 2 weeks free rent. Sign up. You get the first 2 weeks for free. Yep, that's how I did it. And then my property manager was like, what would you say, Nick? You'd be like, ooh. And they did. They went, ooh. And I'm like, don't know. It's fine. I'm in sales. I know incentives. So we did it. We got a lot of applicants and we got a lot of poor applicants. And they were the only applicants that we got. And then I got a tenant in. And that tenant decided to do over $10,000 worth of damage and then walk off. But obviously, I got to keep their $1,800 bond or whatever the hell it was. Every single wall had a hole in it. The place had fleas. It had poop everywhere. And they said it was human poop, not dog poop. So I don't know. So do not just, if you're incentivizing people, think of the incentive and how the type of people that are going to be attracted to that incentive. So that is my big tip. Don't do that. But what are some of the other crazy things? Yes. What are some of the other things that you see investors requesting or doing that you're like, no, don't do that?
Yeah. Look, one of the classic mistakes it's made, and I suggest is probably a little bit of that mistake there, Joe, is this idea of aspiring to a certain rent. It's the wrong way to think about this process. Your property's value, the property value that you have on your property full lease, is what the best quality tenant will pay you for it. That's the actual real term value of it. Okay, doesn't mean you can't get more, but the actual value in real property investment terms is what an excellent tenant will pay you for that property.
And is the reason for that, Nick, because a really good tenant knows they're a good tenant, and they're not going to pay you $20 or $30 above the market rent. Is that why?
Yeah, I think, Joe, what I would have said to you in that scenario, if we're going to use it as a case study, is to say if you're an excellent tenant, Joe, and you're reviewing the market, and I'll be showing you the market next to you, right? These are the ones competing against your property. Are you going to lease this property because of 2 weeks you're getting for free? Or will you lease a property that is simply better value for the dollar you are paying? You know, and I think the reason that you had the problem that you had there, Joe, is because incentivizing tenants that way invites poor quality tenancy and disincentivizes high quality tenancy who can see through the gimmicks. You know, that's the thing. Great tenants don't need to have gimmicks to lease a property. They'll just lease something if it's correctly priced, correctly presented, correctly prepared. You know, they'll recognize that and they'll be attracted to it. You know, in all markets, frankly, you know, and this is a matter of process and method, you know. So that kind of incentive is, look, I don't want to just say a sweeping statement about it as being a terrible idea. There is always a place for creative thinking with this kind of stuff, but in the vast majority of scenarios, get the value right, prepare properly, market properly, get the right eyeballs, and if you're at the right eyeballs, they will give you the data you need to make the right leasing decision about it. So it's all those kinds of things. And I think, you know, think about mistakes that landlords make, right? I had a client that was referred to me from someone from a group, actually, a lovely lady that referred me to this person to help them because they had a really terrible situation with leasing. It was 4 months vacant. I think it was 4 months. She might correct me if she ever hears this. Yes. But it was a situation where, you know, and I said, okay, well, tell me what the problem is. This is the problem? Great. Leave it with me. So I did a bit of mucking around and I discovered one of the world's worst advertised properties. And I thought, well, frankly, it's been vacant, not just because of a bad ad, but no matter what the rent is that's on it now, you're never going to know what the real rent is because it's not being given an opportunity. You know, it's when I look at this ad, I can't see what the place really is. I don't really know what its strengths are. I don't really know what its weaknesses are. I can't really diagnose it as a tenant that's going to be viewing the market generally. So you've got to give it a chance first, you know, so make sure you're getting the right data to the market so they can make an educated decision.
So what's that, like pictures or a better explanation?
Oh, well, the lot. Throw the kitchen sink at it is what you should do. When you're giving information to a market, the things that really annoy tenants when you're marketing properties is not telling them everything. Tell them everything. Don't keep information back. Give them a virtual tour. Give them professional photos. Give them a floor plan. Give them a video walkthrough. Give them everything you can possibly give them. You know, tell them everything in the copy about what's going on there. You know. What has been done, what hasn't been done. Don't try and hide stuff. You know, good tenants aren't idiots. You know, don't infantilize them with your advertising. You know, just be straight with what's going on, and they will reward you for it. You know, and what we ended up, that was a wonderful case study because everything went beautifully. We had really wonderful applicants really quickly when I fixed that problem, and it was great. And often, those are the kinds of mistakes landlords don't even realize are happening. You know, they're not paying enough. Apathy is a big problem in property management. You know, if owners have to care about what is going on, you know, that's not to say you start not trusting people. You've just got to hold your property managers to account for what is happening. You know.
Yeah, 100%. What I like are stories. What's some of the crazier things that you've seen in your property management days?
I wish I had something more funny. There's a couple of weird. Look, there are guys with more ridiculous stories than mine, but there's been a few strange things. I remember having someone I was training in a department once go and see a property, and she came back and said, "Hi, Nick, in this detached garage, this is this amazing setup they've got. I think they're really into gardening. You know, they've got this like wonderful like drainage setup." They've got like 25 power points. They've got like a second power meter for like all this sort of stuff. And I'm going, oh dear. Oh, honey. And it's, you know, this tenant's gone out and have just had this fully fledged, you know, drug lab. And this poor young lady who went in to see this place had just never seen anything like it before and was just thinking they were just really keen gardeners, you know, just were really pumped about it. I thought, oh, that's sweet.
Okay. Well, we've got to run the second ad now, so we'll jump onto that. But I want to hear another good one like that. And then I
promise people that we give them like a how to save and how to make money. So we need to talk about the big ticket items, repairs, maintenance, all those kind of things. And then I want to hear about what's something else I want to hear about, how to actually, when you're buying a property, how a property manager can be your best friend. So that's, stay tuned.
Yeah.
We've got some good value coming your way.
Do people jump off at the ad? I don't know.
No, I'm saying stay tuned. Like, I don't know. I'm saying stick around, because otherwise, if they don't know what's coming up, they might leave.
Don't leave us, guys. Don't, please. I can't take the rejection. Okay, let's do it. Scott Agate. You would have seen him on the 7 p.m. project campaigning against agent underquoting. Scott is an expert negotiator through and through. Every single day, he is negotiating with real estate agents to get the best price for his clients. To give you a bit of a background, Scott has been working in real estate since 1995, and as a real estate agent, built up 3 Bell franchises. He was the guy teaching the agent all the tips and tricks to get the most out of the buyers. However, Scott realized that there was actually no one on the side of the person buying the property, and he saw them constantly letting emotion get in the way and paying way over for the property. And that's why he created Hello House, Australia's first property negotiation as a service business, where he is on the side of the buyer. In hot markets like we have now, you need absolutely every single edge that you can get. These agents are trained professionals, and they are there to get the most money out of you, which is why you need to have an expert of your own in your own corner. The way it works, you find the property, then Scott will come in at the negotiation phase and take over for you. This is how you'll get the property for its true value. He'll ensure that you don't overpay. He comes in, knocks the real estate agent down on price. No more agent games, no more tricks, no more tactics. He is there for you. Scott has been kind enough to offer us an amazing discount on his service, and I've personally just seen a friend pay $20,000 more on a property because of these agent games. Reach out to him with the link below. It'll be the best property investment you will ever make. Hello.
And we're back. So yeah, that was so speaking of real estate agents, property managers, that's this is a question I think I'd be keen to learn from you, is when you've got your property that's sort of sitting there, it may be sort of tenanted or not tenanted. What are some of the top 3 things that people can spend money on that people don't spend money on? What are those things that people should spend money on?
Yeah, I think there's I think there's no sort of silver bullet here. I should probably point out that a lot of what saves you money is being conscientious about your property in a general sense. But I think a few things that people don't think about enough. I think ducted air conditioning, right, is a really interesting one, because ducted AC, when it goes bung, it's expensive. Like when a motor busts, it's multiples of thousands, to sort that out. And often it can be avoided by just getting it serviced. Even just annually, pay a couple of $100 and get a professional in there to just check on it. And it's a really good way of just, I've had as a property, might have been one of my old man's properties actually. I reckon there's a ducted AC there that's lasted maybe 15 years because he's just been so conscientious about getting it checked out, and making sure it's still going. Tell me, do I have to replace it? Do I have to do anything? And the guys are like, no. It's great. We've cleaned it up. It's kind of, it's done they highlight things. They get rid of problems, and it's such a big ticket item. Like you talk about preventative maintenance. That's something that doesn't happen enough.
And what are some of the other items we should be giving preventative maintenance to?
Well, I think pest inspections are another one of those things too. I think, that's something we all, I've even been guilty of this in my own home here. I think really is that annually getting, pest treatments done, to, keep that side of the process really, really, really good, because you want to preserve your capital of your asset. If you're going to sell later, you want your building and pests to look spectacular. So it's a way of making sure.
Good. Thanks for the reminder.
Look, honestly, it's not. Honestly, all of us get a bit, I think, scrappy about pest in buildings. But you want there to be like a service log on a new car or something. You want it to look like you've done all the things you need to do to sort of line that up, so that because you want I mean, every property investor that listens to this, I mean, we want you to make heaps of money. I want you to keep the money when you sell. And it's like that's the kind of thing that can really iron that process out, is making sure you're systemized around that side of the process. So I think those two, in terms of preventative maintenance particularly, I think are really key things. I
What
think
are your thoughts as well on plumbing, Nick? Because that's the other thing that I think can be overlooked, because you say everything's kind of working well until it's not working well. Is plumbing something you look at, or you don't focus too much on?
I'm sorry, just starting. I missed the operative word there, Jeff.
So is plumbing something you focus on as well, or is that something you don't spend too much time on?
Yeah, well, legislatively, in order to gain water usage in New South Wales to charge water usage, you need to get water efficiency certificates done through plumbers. So that involves a plumber checking for leaks, in your property generally, and making sure that's the case in order for you to get usage paid to you. So in New South Wales and in some other states as well, the legislation actually helps a bit with that because it forces you to be more it incentivizes you to be conscientious, which is good. So there's a bit of that which is useful. So certainly around grout in showers, showers can start leaking for mysterious reasons. So those kinds of things are quite useful. So waterproofing is a thing, yeah.
Yeah, I've just had a friend who he's saying it could cost him tens of thousands of dollars to get the waterproofing redone in his kind of shower, because it's leaked, or not the waterproofing, but it's since the waterproofing isn't good, it's leaked and caused damp in the sort of, it's a townhouse, so double story, so it's leaked from the top to the bottom, which has just caused a whole bunch of underlying issues, which could have been fixed with better waterproofing.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the upstairs bathroom. I was about to say the same thing. Like, if you're going to really be conscientious about that issue, it's upstairs wet areas that your problem is, really. So you've got to make sure that stuff, particularly, as properties get older, that's where you can have real danger, if you don't do that properly. So it's as properties get older, particularly. Yeah. I think I think small aspects though that really add something when you're thinking about this kind of thing. I think carpet. I just want to talk about carpet for a second. Carpet is kind of crap. I'm just going to put that out there for a minute. From an investment point of view, the net benefit of carpet is low. And I think you might love carpet. You might have wonderful carpet in a property or whatever it is, but it retains odors. It gets ripped. It retains. It's got allergy issues for a lot of tenants. It ages badly. There are flooring alternatives that just perform much, much better. I'm talking about over the course of thousands of properties. It just, and I've got carpet in part of one of my properties, but the opportunity I have to get rid of it when it sort of ages out, I'm looking forward to, because it'll end up getting a much better long-term result. Vinyl and these days is much better than it ever was. Floating floors are much better than they ever were. There's too many better options. I'd suggest that will give you a better finish that will last longer, and you'll end up spending less on steam cleaning and less on sort of, repairing stupid stuff or having arguments with tenants about, stupid things on carpet. Just get rid of carpet. It is honestly
no carpet. And what are we replacing with tiles or floating floorboards?
The floating floors are great. Tiles are a bit expensive sometimes. If you want to go nuts with tiles, they're great. But they're good because they're not as cost effective sometimes. So I think that there's some great vinyls of floating floors that are really good. There's a whole variation of a bunch of good flooring options, really, because they don't get scratched up as easily as they used to. It's just much more effective now than they used to be. And I say that because maybe 20 years ago, it wasn't as good an idea to do this, or 30 years ago. But now there's just too many better options. And if people want soft underfoot, get a rug. There are things that tenants can do to that if they want to. But I think in our climate, in most parts of Australia, you're better off just not having it. It doesn't, particularly in Sydney. I mean, it's, Sydney's a swamp town, really, during summer. It's really heavily humid and just, it doesn't work as well. We build our houses for summer,
So what are some of the equity? So I'm all about equity at the beginning of your property investment. And actually I might roll on into a little story here with my property manager. So I wrote in that little pump up post there that one of my property managers made me 80 grand. And the way that they did that was just me going to the property and actually speaking with the property manager and just going through the whole property room by room and just be going like, hey, what would you do in this instance? How would you improve the value here? What would you do here? And she's like, you need to install an air conditioner in here. And I'm like, I don't really want one. There's already one in the other room. And she's like, yeah, but you're not going to get it listed. I'm like, okay, that's great. What else? And then everything was just what else? I'm like, if you were to get like super creative, what would you do in this situation? And she's like, well, what I would do is see this massive lounge room that you have here? Well, what I would do is put a wall up And then I would put a second aircon. I know you're against aircons, Joe, but hear me out. You put a second in, and then all of a sudden you've got a 2-bedroom and you've turned it into 3 bedrooms. Then you've kind of cut out a bit of a living room. So you put a bench in the kitchen, which would then give the people a table. And all of a sudden you've just grown in equity by a large percentage. And for me, that works sensationally well. We bought it for $280,000. We did a $24,000 reno and it revalued at $369,000. And it was just recently revalued for $420,000. Because it's moved from the 2-bedroom bracket to the 3-bedroom bracket, which is awesome. So a little bit long-winded, but that was just the value of a property manager. Like, if I didn't have that conversation, I'd be stuck with a 2-bedroom place that's probably worth about 350 right now, but now it's worth 420. So I'm all for that. What are some of the other equity uplifts that people can do that might be overlooked?
Oh, warms my heart, Joe, to hear you take advice like that. That's a great story. But I was thinking as you said that, I think when you're giving advice as a PM or as a property professional, you try to contextualize it with the property you're looking at. So you've got to be a bit careful not to sort of, it's easy to overcapitalize and to sort of point money in the wrong direction. So you've got to be careful with that. But I think really you're right when it's that shifting categories that does you a lot of good. If you can shift categories successfully, in a really useful way, that's practical and from a design point of view works, if it flows properly, if you've got windows where they're supposed to be, if you've got egress where it's supposed to be, all these sorts of things are really important, So I think a couple of examples you get in there has been really good. If you can go from 2 to 3, that's fantastic. What you shouldn't necessarily do if you have a 3-1-1, if you have a 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 garage, turning the garage into a bedroom and sort of calling it 4-bedroom and saying, pay me more money is not necessarily what's going to happen, because all you're doing is taking a strength away and replacing it with something else. So it's a lateral move, Yeah. Now, where you can have some victory there is if you've got a block, for instance, which has a lovely sort of extended driveway at the front and a garage that actually lends itself naturally into the flow of a living space. Then you can actually turn a garage into a bedroom, have a renovate at the front and have a carport or enclosed carport if you want to go nuts. And then you've got a 4-1-1 instead of a 4-1-0. And you completely destroy the balance of the house, So you can shift categories so long as you can make sure that the needs of the occupant is dealt with well. And you can tell what's happening as a PM here. And your PM there, Joe, would have known this, because what you have is you'll see when tenants live in a property, what they do. If they don't have something, they'll compensate. So what I mean by that is that if you do have like a 4-1-0, if you have a 3-1-1 that turns into a 4-1-0, and there's no parking anymore, they'll park on the front lawn, or they'll park diagonally on the council strip or something, and they'll do, and the neighbour will go, who's your property manager? They're ruining the front lawn, blah blah blah. But what they're telling you is, I don't have anywhere to put my car, and there's 4 bedrooms worth of people that live here. You can't, it's very logical stuff when you think it out. So, but if you cater for that problem, then you're great. It's like the granny flat stuff we spoke briefly about before. If you can supply a bit of car accommodation, then you'll beat every other granny flat that doesn't have it, because it's such a treasured little feature of that property. So not only will you boost your yield, but your capital goes up too, because you've almost got a proper little duplex rather than a second dwelling, in that traditional sense. So when you talk about big value adds, that's where you can really get categories going, and when you're shifting categories in constructive ways. So it's really, and it's the fun of having a house on a block, by the way, too, as opposed to units in that respect. But certainly,
I think Joe, we have to do one of those. We have to do a case study ourselves. Eventually, we will. I don't know. Maybe why not?
A case study on what? On a
we have to do a reno ourselves.
Which it's funny. I was actually thinking about that just the other day. I'm currently renovating camper vans. I'm turning a normal van into a camper van, and I'm laying flooring exactly as I lay flooring in the reno. I'm painting the sides of the walls a different color. I'm laying the walls against the thing. I'm not messing with any electricals. I'm not messing with the engine, but it's very similar to, I'm setting the bed up. It's very similar. So I'm like, maybe I turn this into a reno project, like a lockdown reno project. Maybe.
Property Brothers 3.0, the reno project, maybe not. But let's kind of, I love that all back and forward on how you actually can add value to a property in an equity and from a rental perspective. that's amazing. I think people should really sort of consider this whenever they buy any property. Speaking of buying property, that's something that a big ticket, particularly with lockdowns at the moment. How do you, because this causes a bit of consternation in the group. How do you get a property manager to help you out with looking for a property? Because some people say, there's conflict of interest because of course they're going to tell you to buy a property. I don't know. I don't agree with that, but anyway, some people say that. So how do you get the property manager to help? Well, how do you do it, and what can they do when you're looking at buying a property?
Look, really good property managers are excited to help people. You've got to find someone who's excited to help you. That's the first thing. So if the property manager seems a bit like they're not up for it, well, don't use them for it. There'll be others. Find someone who's excited to help, I think, is the first thing. And they won't care whether they have it or not. They'll just love the idea of being asked. It'll be really cool. You'd be surprised how effective that is to just ask an opinion of someone. You could. Yeah.
Is that common? Is it common as well? Like how? Because I've never thought of, until Joe mentioned it, probably 12, 18 months, whatever it was. Is that common that people come to you and say, "I've got this property I'm looking at. Could you kind of give me the rundown as to what if it's good property or whatever?" Or?
Yeah, as a BDM, I did it all the time. Like, it was pretty commonplace, really. I do it now because people see me. I guess the people who know me will ask all the time. It's a fairly common thing, and I think really. It allows, what I would traditionally do is I'd treat it as though I was managing it and give them the advice I would give to any client who had that asset and what they were shaping up to face, and give them an idea about how that's going to shape up. And I think the grand value of this is that property managers, that their heads are in this every day, and they're in it over the course of years. Like, they're traveling the investment journey with landlords. This is what's happening. It's a partnership. It's not it's. As I said before, I think it's not like buying a Mars bar. You're with people for a long time. And what that does is it gives you a real depth of understanding about not just sort of your own portfolio, but everyone's portfolio that you interact with, So you get a lot of really strong ideas about how this is going to go. And the value of getting some of that knowledge out of a property manager, when you're saying, I'm thinking about buying this, 3-bedroom place over in, I don't know, pick a suburb over in, Liverpool, down the road or whatever, how do you think that's going to go?
Hopefully it's not a unit, because I think there's a bit of an oversupply in Liverpool at the moment.
Yeah, I was about to say, Jeff, I think if you're a house on a block in Liverpool, you're already ahead of the game, so there's without having to go much further. So there's a few things there but if you're buying in Lanier, you've got to be a little bit careful about where you're buying and what sort of capital improvement you can make that will affect things positively, because there might be a ceiling on your value because of a particular street or area. There could be, I just did some work for a client in Epping. Epping's got a huge unit oversupply issue at the moment. The links to Macquarie Uni down the road there aren't many students around, so that's copped a bit of a hit. Glebe is a little bit the same. So, there are gluts of units that need to bleed through some supply as we open our borders up again. So how does that play out against other types of markets that are more resilient? And you get to see those things from a leasing point of view and how the yields change over time. And how, are you prepared, if you buy this asset, to ride that wave a little bit should X, Y, Z occur? All those developments that are coming up, or what do people in this region value the most? Why they live here, and what is it about those neighborhoods that makes them valuable?
100%. Yeah. And I think, like, for me, I think my biggest, people are like, oh, I saw someone like, oh, what's the best way to research property? For me, the data is very good. But also the next best way to go about it is jump on the phone to property managers. Now, if you go to, the reason I'm saying property managers instead of listing agents is because the listing agent, when you say, hey, where should I buy in this area? He's going to say, oh, around this area, and this. Oh, isn't that where all your houses that you have listed currently? That's where they're at? Yeah. Okay, great. Property managers, they're a lot more invested in getting you a good tenancy and a good lease. So they know the areas that are not so hot, the not spots, right? The areas that you should not go to at all. And you can jump on the phone with multiple, let's say there's 5 or 6 property managers in the area, and you can just say, where are the good spots? Where are the not so good spots? Where should I be looking at? What are some of the areas that you see the most success? What are some of the areas you see the highest vacancy rates? And then these people know, and then you start to collect the 5-6 people's data and brains, and then all of a sudden you've got a great read on the market.
The data marries up with the narrative. You can hear what's going on the ground. Boots on the ground.
Yeah, and they're not going to hide from you. I mean, this idea of I think this idea of kind of bias is a bit of a there's not really a lot of self-interest there in that discussion.
No,
when you're ringing up,
it's the incentives in aligning, right? Your incentive of finding a good property and a good tenant is what their incentives are. You both are going for the same thing, so their job is going to be made easier by finding you a better property in a better location that's going to rent better tenants.
If they get you a bad property, then it's not doesn't really suit anybody's purpose.
No, if anyone's going to be invested, it's on the sales side because it's transactional. If you're going to go in that direction.
That's what I'm saying.
So I mean, if you're going to insert cynicism, it's probably more likely to go in that direction than anything else. But I think
that's why I don't really call up real estate. Well, I do. You call up both, but I trust more on what the property manager is saying, but also to understand the demographics of an area. Because you want to know who's going to actually be renting this place and renovations. I don't know really if there's a question here, but it's very important to renovate to the demographic that is going to be buying your property. Have you seen that happen where someone does a sensational renovation or a terrible renovation, tailored it to X demographic and Y demographic was the only one in the market?
Oh, well, it happens all the time. Overcapitalizing is crazy easy to do in a lot of markets, particularly in Western Sydney. There's a lot of mate, it happens constantly. You go into a place and see it's laced with marble, and you're thinking, what is going on? It's just, I have 3 categories. I just advised a client of mine today about this. 3 categories of work you do to a property: stuff that you need to do, stuff that you should do, and stuff that you could do. Okay. What you need to do gets you compliant. Okay. Gets you lettable. All right. What you should do is things that will then level you up. It will improve your tenant quality, will improve your marketplace, will improve the status of your property, will make it more resilient, durable, better for the long term. Let's think 5-10 years. It's hard to think that way as a human, but that's what we've got to do in investment in terms. And the third thing is sticking a water fountain in the backyard. You could do it if you want, but I can't guarantee it's going to equal dollars. And that's the kind of thing.
Can we do a fondue tower or something? I want a fondue for my.
Yeah, that's right. So, and I've seen a few water fountains, a few sort of category 3 things that were just things done because someone fancied something, and that's not. And it can be as simple, just quietly, as a feature wall. That's the category 3 thing. Okay, feature walls. First of all, they're kind of outdated stylistically, I'd suggest, in a lot of places. But more than that, I had a property, and my wife reminded me this earlier today. A friend of mine that is also a client of mine, a friend of ours, had a feature wall in a property, and I had no less than 4 tenants say, "Can I paint over that wall?" And I thought, isn't that interesting, right? Like, it wasn't an offensive wall; it was it wasn't bad, but it was just the market was screaming not to do that, in that particular environment. At least it was great. It's going very well, the property, but it was more like don't introduce things into your property that will shrink the percentages, of tenants that will look at it or appeals to. There's a reason why you see lots of investment properties that are painted antique white. It's because it's no one gets offended by antique white. That's kind of the idea, is you want to be as plain as you can. And I think things like that really people do. When they overcapitalize all that category 3 stuff that I think about, geez, they make some dopey decisions around it, and there's money that gets flushed down the toilet when they do it, and that's kind of the key thing. So it's the should stuff that gets you where you need to go for the most part, and the could stuff can work just quietly. I don't want to completely rule that out. It can certainly work and give you some capital in the end, but as you say, Joe, depends on the market you're in. If you're appealing to a buyer that's just not going to buy there, because the more of that could stuff you do, the more you bend in an owner-occupier's direction, and you're playing on emotion. And emotion is going to be tied so much to location, so much to aspect and all those infrastructure elements, and where you are is going to tie you a little bit to how that money gets spent and what you end up getting out of it. So you've got to be super careful. Yeah.
Well, that's I think that's a good overview as to what's the what the property manager can help you with, and how to actually be as beneficial with the property manager on yours or helping you out. So I think we're almost getting to the hour and a half. Let's dive into some questions. Or is there a question you had, Joe, while we
No, I'm excited to hear some of the questions. I think we've been getting some throughout the group as well. So I'm going to sift through some of those, and then you jump through the ones that are in the group, the ones that you've got there, Jeff.
Okay.
I can't see any of this. So.
No. If you click on the left-hand side, the comments, I can do that. But I'll there was one who said, let's see, I think we sort of answered some of this. I don't know if so George asked what would make a great property manager. I think we spoke about that. Somebody who actually sort of presents in it. I think we did speak about it before. But one of the things.
One thing actually I thought I'd just raise on that is you're going to be communicating with these people at emotional times. Your property investment, as much as it's just a non-emotional asset, it's going to get emotional. So make sure that you actually connect with the property manager. They may be the best property manager in the world, but if your persona and their persona doesn't get along, it's going to be very hard to work with them. So maybe it is the best to go to the second best. So try and build a bit of a relationship. That's very key. I don't know. Would you kind of agree with that one, Nick?
Yeah, look, I think it's such an important point. Here's a secret. Property management is not really about property. It's about relationships with human beings and the ability to resolve conflict and the ability to foster empathy, authenticity, and logic. And you do that sort of stuff, you're building the foundation of trust. And the other little secret is if you extend trust with accountability, if you extend trust to your professional helpers, be they property managers or anyone else, they will reward you tenfold. I will tell you. I am blown away to some degree that my clients trust me to manage their properties. It blows my mind. Like, I think it's incredible that they give me that trust, and it makes me want to take a bullet for them, because I know that they listen to my advice and they go, Nick, you're the pro, mate. I'll do it. That's great. That's such a special thing, and great property managers treasure the trust, and they are desperate to justify it and validate it, So yeah. I think the less trust you extend, you're lowering the bar for that relationship. And it's a long one, as you say, Joe. It's potentially a very long one that can be very lucrative. And it will be more lucrative if you create that atmosphere of trust. Because you're right, Joe, there's emotional conversations. And you've got to be able to have hard conversations in property management. And you've got to be able to have hard conversations as a property investor. Sometimes I tell my clients, look, this is not a fun thing that I'm telling you to do here. But to do the best job I possibly can for you, I have to give you this advice. This is what you need to do to resolve this issue. It's the best possible advice. And do you not want me to give you the best possible advice? That's what you pay me to do,
Yeah, 100%. Okay, cool. Well, one of the things that we have in this group are a lot of people that have 1, 2, 3, 4, which is great properties. But how do you go about managing, I guess, maybe this is more on the investor side of things, but when you have like 5 plus, 10 plus, 15, 20 plus, what are some of the things that you're seeing? How do you manage so many properties as an individual? How do you do it? Because there are people in this group that have 30 properties, and I'm like, I don't know how the hell do you stay on top of that? How does that work? How do you do it?
You forget where some of them are. Like, but it used to blow my mind. I was dealing with clients who had many properties, and they'd be like, oh, I can't remember which one. And I'm like, gee, I wish I had a portfolio where I was forgetting properties I own.
100%.
But it is a bit like that. It does become quite cumbersome because it becomes almost like a little property management exercise in itself, and almost a scale portfolio that involves some scale tasks to some degree. But it depends on what your setup is. If you've got a few in different states, then you've got some challenging situations because you want to have some quality everywhere. You want to have people supplying to you equal relationships of trust across different legislative environments and different types of categories of property. So it does get quite layered. But I think one thing I often don't really understand is that some of these multiple property owners will have properties in the same city, maybe 10 of them. And they'll have 3 with a property manager and 3 with another one and 3 with another one. And the thinking is, I'm going to make sure they're always on their toes because they know they've got competition. And I can't get my head around that. I think that just all it does is it costs you relationships. It just erodes the existing relationships, sort of pit people against each other or threaten them that they're going to lose the business if they don't, produce an extra $30 a week out of their back pockets or something. Like it's not how this game works. What you're better off doing is packaging them together and finding someone that you really, really trust and rely on. and will do an excellent job for you. But I mean, people think the way they think. It's fine, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But it's one of those things where I think minimizing your conversations and being able to, have a limited number of people in your circle of professional trust there that will be able to economize what you're doing and make your life simpler, so that you might have a property manager who knows you have these 20 properties, has them in front of them, and can give you advice on how to maximize your yield out of that lot of 20, and can put plans into place for you over the next 5 years, next 10 years, put maintenance plans together for you, and actually forecast a little bit about how that you're going to play with this, portfolio from a property management perspective too, I might add. This is not financial advice. This is just about managing your properties effectively. So being able to economize what you're doing there. And it might be as simple as economizing who's paying all your bills. How's that working at the moment? Can we get all those onto your financial year statement and make sure you're viewing them cleanly and collectively? So you know where your big spends are, where's your big chunk of water rates going? Why are you spending so much water on these 5 properties and not on the other 10 or whatever it might be? If you've got a trained eye looking at your collective portfolio and understanding it really well, then you're actually in a much better position to make decisions yourself. And that's why you have professionals, in my view. I mean, I employ people to do stuff that I don't know how to do so they can help me, and it's like, I think that's a really good property manager. Find a really great one and pump them for what they're worth, trust them implicitly, because they will fall in love with you and they'll want to help you. And they'll be encouraged to go that way.
That's a great tip. I love that. Yeah, 100%. It makes perfect sense. Use them as much as you can. Use as much value rather than, what do we got here?
I want to bring up a question here from Katrina, because I'm interested in this one myself, actually.
It's a great question.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this one from Katrina? Thanks for asking us as well.
Yeah, so kitchens, bathrooms, selling properties, the same is true for renting. It can be. And I think I don't know about how much more would you say you can attract. I mean, there's broad strokes there, but you'll certainly do better. What I would say is that living spaces are really critical. And I want to make that really clear. Like, if it is kitchens and bathrooms, they have a lot to do with it for sure. Kitchens are really operative parts of the home. So are bathrooms, we all use them. But living areas are where you spend most of your time. And you've got to have a size of living area that complements the size of property you have, that constructively functions really well with it. I often tell clients, you've got a house on a block. Some clients will say, I've got a 600-meter block in a 2.5 bedroom house or something. And it's like, well, people pay for what they can fit under a roof. That's what they're paying for. They're paying for how they live in the home day to day. So living spaces are really, really critical. And often you'll find that there'll be a $20 or $30 difference a week in a second living space, as opposed to one open living space. I advised a client the other day who had a 4-bedroom design of property on the market for lease. This is about 6 months ago. But one of the bedrooms had like an archway and was sort of converted into a second living area. And he said, can't we sort of change that back into a bedroom and sort of go that way? And I said, look, it's much better to have a big, spacious, well-equipped 3-bedroom than it is to have a squeezed 4-bedroom. Okay, because you'll be at the lower end of one category or the higher end of another, and you're better off being at the higher end of the bigger category, because you'll look like you're presenting a better product, a bigger product, and also that particular category, there wasn't as many of them in that particular environment, so it worked better. There was a bit more scarcity, so it ended up working better to have extra living space in that environment. So this is not to discourage you from having good kitchens and bathrooms, because you should, and they are critical elements. That there's a reason why renovating those elements has done quite well, particularly bathrooms. Bathrooms, if you've got good tiling, your tiling's okay. You can change a vanity, a shower screen, and your fixtures, just those 3 things, and it looks like a new bathroom. So if you just do those 3 things, just your tap fixtures, your shower screen, and your vanity in a regular sort of small bathroom, that can cost you maybe a grand, or a couple of grand maybe, and you'll instantly, might be getting $20 or $30 a week extra. So you're sort of returning 15 or 20% on that investment, and so those things are really valuable. But so I don't want to draw attention away from that, but I do want to say living spaces tend to have a bigger impact, because when a tenant walks into a place and they're going to move pretty quickly, they might be moving away from somewhere else. They might be coming from interstate. They want to figure out whether both their kids will fit into the property and they can live there conceivably. Well, that's, living space is more important, I would suggest, for pure value.
That Zoom room or the study room as well, given that where there may be
the Zoom room. One of the questions. One of the questions here is around trades. How do you get the best and most affordable trades? So trades being sparkies, chippies, tradies, handymen. How do you do it?
Yeah, one thing you don't do is ask for 3 quotes in every job you ever get. Because what that does is it starts to piss off the trades that never get work from you, and they start to think you're wasting your time, So I think a little bit like when you're enlisting a property manager, make your assessment of trades that are there and available at the time. This is what good property managers do too, and form a relationship with them. Give them an incentive to do a good job. Pay them quickly. Give them an opportunity on a job or two to see what they're going to do. Do they do what they say they're going to do? Is there integrity in that relationship? Have they treated, if you've got a tenant in place, are they polite? Have they treated your tenant well when they've got access to the property? Have they gone about it correctly? Is the quality of the job good? Have they taken photos at the start and the finish of what they've done? Give them a chance to prove to you, how good they are, and that's one way of assessing that issue. And I think it's really important, but don't sort of start to introduce the idea that I've got 3 other, sparkies here that will replace you in 2 seconds flat. No. See if you can get a relationship going with these people, and that's how you'll benefit long-term out of that sort of environment. So give them a chance to show you how good they are, and put full faith in that first before you sort of start thinking about your alternatives. And if they let you down, that's okay. Trades, it's a tricky, particularly handyman. That's a tricky thing because, really good ones are stacked with work all the time. So you do have to have backups for that sort of stuff, and quick turnaround is often really important. So things like that. But I think give them an opportunity to perform, do your research on your trades and make sure that you know who does a lot of work in an area, if that's what you want. Someone who responds quickly to you, if they respond quickly to you, it means they care about doing your job. And all those things are really important. So the way they speak to you, the way they conduct themselves on site, all those sorts of things. But give them a chance to do the job. I think there's no other way really to assess it until you give them an opportunity to do a job.
Yeah, maybe to start off with a small job that, paint the fence and then see how their process is and how they handle it. One of the biggest things for me that I think got a lot of attractive when I was doing when I've been doing my reno projects is, hey, I'm going to pay you on time. I'm going to pay you fast. You do the work, I pay you straight away. I can pay you cash. I can pay you card. I can pay you bank deposit, whatever you want, however you want it. You're going to get it after you do the job. And a lot of the larger franchises, and maybe you can actually speak to that. What does it look like for one of those trades when they're going through a larger agency? What's like the payment process? And you've got to think some of these trades, they're on their paycheck, maybe not paycheck to paycheck, but the cash flow is very crucial for a business.
It's a great point, Joe. When you talk about scale agents, big agencies before, I can tell you plenty of trades hate large real estate agencies with a passion. And they choose not to do work for them. Now, and it's often because large agencies, having been a part of one, we certainly felt this way when I was part of the agencies, that we wield a lot of market influence. We have a lot of jobs to give out, so where the customer come to us, we've got this, that's the angle that gets played. The problem with that is that trades, and to some degree this happens all the time, is that trades will be paid through rent that's paid as well. So to do a big job, it might be 3 or 4 weeks until there's enough rent to pay them. That's for a start. And secondly, if they're being paid at a large agency, there might be one payment run done every month. So not going to get, they might do it at the start, they're not going to get paid for 3 or 4 weeks for a $200 job.
And then they've got to chase it up and keep knocking on the door and be like, and then you've got 6 real estate agents that owe you money. Has he paid me yet? Has she paid me yet?
Yeah, it's terrible. And I really don't want any of my trades to feel that way if I can possibly avoid it. So at least I sort of set a relationship where they know what the terms are. I've had one just yesterday go to do a job and say, he didn't even tell me what he was going to charge. There's only a small job, but he's going to go there. He responded quickly. He got in contact with the tenant. The tenant was appreciative. It was quick. I said, okay, he hasn't told me the price. That's not great. I don't like that. But if he does the job well, I'm going to explain to him after he does the job, please tell me what the costs are, mate. Particularly if it's higher than I'm appreciative of, I'm going to say that's not smart to do that. But if it's reasonable, I'm going to say this is great. Even if it's a little bit more expensive than I'm expecting, I'd encourage my clients to pay it because this guy did exactly what he said he was going to do, promptly and well. And we should pay him well for it. We should pay him quickly. And I think those kinds of things are really important.
What happened in the end?
It hasn't happened yet. This particular one.
Oh shit!
So I'm looking forward to see what happens in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Only a small job, I should say. So it's not a particular.
And do you go by hour or do you go a fixed rate? Do you say, okay, great, give me the fixed?
I should say too, by the way, if this ends up blowing up, I'll pay for it myself. I'm not using my client's money if he does something stupid. I've allowed this to happen this way, so I'm happy to take responsibility for what happens if it's not great. I don't just want to put that out there for a minute. That's the advantage to running your own business. I'm happy to do that and take that risk to measure this guy's performance over the course of the next few days to my client.
Yeah, well, and he's going to be more appreciative because you're going to provide a lot of work to him. And by the sounds of it, you're not nickeling and diming these people, which is what they appreciate a lot as well.
No, I say get on with it. Can you do it? Great, do it. And that's, I can tell you, trades love that stuff. If you're going to just give them the job. And they'll know Nick's a guy who gives me jobs. He doesn't muck around. So he prioritizes me. I go up in their estimation, and that's a huge, huge thing because they know I don't muck around, and I think that's really, really critical. And there's owners who say, and look, just quietly, of course you get multiple quotes when jobs are complicated and large, it's irresponsible not to. But on every day it matters where, property managers do often the same 6 or 7 jobs over and over again at different properties.
Replace a light bulb, for example, you probably don't need 4 quotes for that.
No, exactly. And I think there are certain landlords that have this idea that they're not getting the best deal if they don't do this. And it's just poor property investing. It's not effective work.
Yeah, I kind of go with, I'll get one. And then I ask the property manager, do you think that is good or bad? Or should we get another one? And also I think no, that's too expensive. Like the other day, I got a $350 quote. I'm like, I can go there and do it for $50. So can you please get another quote? And then another quote comes back for $160. And I'm like, fine, I'm willing. I'm not going to go over there. It'll cost me a plane ticket. So, I'll pay the extra $100.
and probably 14-day quarantine, Joe. I mean, geez.
Yeah, exactly. I'll pay the extra $100. Please go sort the thing.
But what a great example, Joe. That little example there, you're saying, what do you think, property manager? Could that be because you trust their opinion, Joe? You've got some stock in what you're employing them to do. What a great thing, That's what you're paying them for, getting that view 100%. And trying to fold in. And secondly, you're holding them to account because you're not just blindly accepting it. You're saying, hang on a minute, this seems like a lot. Do you think that's a lot? That's a good, healthy conversation to have between a landlord and a property manager.
And a great one, a great question to ask is, I'm always about asking better questions, get better answers. And another one to ask is, of the last 3 of these that you got, because you're managing 250 places, how much were the most recent quotes that you got? And then they're like, oh, actually, yeah, that is the most expensive one I've had in the past 6 months. Great. Well, get me back Roger, who did the other quote. I want Roger back, or Steve, or whoever did the last one. So stop giving me, Johnny. I don't want him.
That's fair enough too.
Or Jess, there's female traders.
Well, there is. Yeah. There was another question relating to, if you've got a bit of cash set up, would you rather repair and actually, let's talk about that. Repairing and what is it? Maintenance and
renovation. I think we were talking about before.
Yeah, maintenance, renovation.
Maintenance.
Yeah. Can we dive into that a little bit? Yeah. What is the difference and how does it work and why do we get so lost with it? Because I want to renovate my property. Is it maintenance? I don't know.
Yeah, one of the typical problems is you'll have an owner who will perform some maintenance at a property, and I'll define this in a sec. And I'll go to the property manager and say, "Great, whack the rent up by $10. This is brilliant. I've done some work, I've spent some money. Give me that money back." And you go, "Hang on a minute." As a property manager, you go, "Hang on a minute. You've done some maintenance." Yep. Guess what maintenance is? Maintenance is getting your property from below where it should be back to where it should be. That's what maintenance is. It's something that's falling away that needs improvement. That's the key thing, right? It's getting worse, not better. Renovation is when you go with intent to improve your yield and capital. They're 2 very different things, and they get conflated together, those 2 terms, maintenance and renovation. And it's a very, renovation is when you go with intent to improve your yield and capital.
There you go. Just you telling you. Just to reinforce it, just to let you know, Nick, you're right. Maintenance and renovation. That makes perfect sense because I've done that, right? Again, worst property. The first property was the worst. First the worst, second the best, third the golden princess. Yeah, and
you got a different one.
Yeah, and what was it? Oh yeah, initially I spent $6,000 on electrical. just straight up, just the tradie came in and said, "Hey, by the way, your electrical is not up to standard." Huh?
That sounds like a lot. $6,000 on electrical.
It was everything. It was there was the box at the front. It was the wires throughout the entire house. It was absolutely
literally a rewiring of the home.
It was the full thing. There was a whole kit caboodle. Yeah. I got a bargain. I'm fantastic. No one told me about it. Did a pest and building. Didn't get raised. But that's because I used the buyer's agent I shouldn't have trusted and his trades that I shouldn't have trusted. Anyway, but that's not what it's about. What did I have a question about that, or I just?
There was a question about. So, Kate, is this about your question about using in-house versus outsourcing? Is that a question you want to ask her?
Let's define those terms for a bit, hey? In-house trades as opposed to outsourcing. So, are you saying that because in-house implies that agents employ trades internally, which they don't tend to do.
No, I think they don't do that, do they?
Not generally, no. There are agents that I've been in management meetings where it's been toyed with every now and then. But
let's use the word preferred tradies versus
100%. That's what it would be, because that's what my my agency does. They have like 3 or 4 people on the books, and they go out there and they just work with their preferred suppliers. And that's kind of like what you're talking about, Nick. You've got these relationships. So what this person's saying is, should I go out to High Pages if I get a quote and I'm not happy with it, or should I use their in-house stuff?
Well, I think you just gave the best example, Joe. Like, I think really, if someone comes to you with one of their existing guys and says this is what it costs, and you're unhappy with it, you say, that seems high. Can you explain the quote to me? You know, is it itemized? You know, how is this coming together? Are they spending on time? What products are they using to get to this point? Because I'm confused about this. So get them to expand on it. As you say, Joe, the quality of question is really important here.
The quality
so, you know, don't sort of, don't blindly assume. But you're right. Preferred trades are there because they're often vetted. They're often insured correctly. They've got all that, they've been through the ringer with a good agent, hopefully, is what they've done, is go through that. So there's a reason they are preferred, and it's because they do a better job and they're quick and they're reliable and they treat people well, all those sorts of things. But that's not to say they're perfect. They still make mistakes or charge high sometimes. So just apply the same rules. Make sure that you're understanding, but just ask why. I don't know. There's no need to go off to an investment group to ask a big group of questions. Just ask the person you're employing and see what they say to you, and if you're unhappy with that response, then certainly ask something else. But if you're unhappy with that response, that speaks to other issues too. So I think, try to understand a bit more about what those trades are. And if you want to outsource, look, agents don't, some agents get a bit weird about it, but look, if you've got a trade that you really like, that's not on that list, it's your property. You can direct your PM to go in that direction. It's not an illogical thing to do, but just take the advice, subsume it all, and make sensible decisions on the back of it.
Yeah, and if it's a big ticket item, you're probably going to want to get your own quotes anyway. If it's a larger job, and people in the area, and you're like, I want to get Bob and John to do that one. Yeah, nice. Okay, great. Are there any more questions loaded up in there, Jeff?
None that I can see at this stage. If anybody's got any questions, can we use Airtasker? Oh, geez, that's a loaded
Can we
question.
use Airtasker? Actually, my whole renovation project was
things.
renovation project.
Can you is a loaded question. Should you use Airtasker? I don't know. You can, because you can doesn't mean you should. But I think Joe's had some success. But
oh, mate, I had so much success. It's really hard to get the phone number of the Airtasker person, so we had to take a photo of a piece of wood with the phone number scrawled onto it so I could call the guy, because we took photos of the phone number, because you can't upload phone numbers, and they catch it. They have the tech to catch it, and they have AI to read everything, so we had to do this dodgy stuff.
So anyway, you wanted to try and do it off the platform, did you?
Off the platform, and I'm like, okay, great, I'll pay you cash, and he's like, okay, great.
Black market Airtasker.
Black market Airtasker. Terrible. Look, yes, I use Airtasker all the time for actually doing the renovation project, but not for ongoing maintenance. It's the same as High Pages and Airtasker though.
Just be a little bit careful. Look what I can hear property managers, friends of mine, and industry friends of mine going over my shoulder at the moment with this, because the thing that does stress PMs out is when works are done, if they're not insured for that job and they're not indemnified for that job, and something goes wrong, you want to have recourse, and recourse can be difficult if it's some rando coming from some platform or something that doesn't have those things behind them. So
kind of like the Uber driver who tries to get me to give me his number and then take a ride with him after that. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Do I trust this person?
Yeah, it's just, I think that's I'm not against Airtasker necessarily. I mean, there are sometimes, property managers full of weird jobs that pop up sometimes that are hard to define, frankly. And you sort of have to find solutions to problems, and good PMs will find good solutions, But we also have to do it within that line of compliance, because we've got to give you a strong legal platform to be on at each moment of your property journey with us, And you've got to be able to launch a defense if there's some problem that emerges. And if someone's not qualified for a job or isn't applying their skills to the right job or does something wrong, there's a degree of liability involved with that. So you've got to be really careful.
Here's a really good question.
Loving the Q&A.
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to mute your Facebook? I think it's doubling up.
That's all good. No.
How do you ensure you're getting fair rent for a long-term tenant, and how do you approach a raise?
Oh, this is a great question. I love this question.
Fantastic question.
This is, look, the short answer is, when you assess any rent increase, the question to ask yourself is, if my property was vacant tomorrow, what would it get? Okay, if there was no tenant tomorrow and I had to release my property, what sort of rent am I looking at here? That's a really good question to get an answer to.
I'm trying to give you a hint. Oh, no, so you're not saying zero. I thought you were trying to make a joke.
No. I'm giving you a measurement for value, right? And the reason this is a good question to ask when you're assessing a rent increase is because that's exactly the intent of applying a rent increase. A rent increase exists in order to get you from where you are to where the market believes you should be. Okay, that's the idea. And there are multiple things that play into this, right? First of all, there's the law in New South Wales. You can, these days, as of March last year, you can, I think it was last year, someone correct me, but you can only increase rent once a year. Okay, so you've got one kind of bullet in your gauge per annum. It used to be 4, now it's 1. Sorry, used to be a few times. Used to be a few times, but it's 1 now. It's changed a bit over the years, but it's 1 time now. And you wouldn't, you'd never, anyway. So you've got 1 time there from a legal point of view, but you've got to ask the question about what you're going to attract should this tenant not be there. And again, the question is, what will an excellent tenant pay you for it? Not what any tenant will pay you for it. What will an excellent tenant pay you for it? If the answer to that is $20 above where you are, and you can get that conclusively, then, well, there's your answer to some degree, right? And that's just the financial answer, okay? You might have a fantastic tenant who treats your property beautifully. The prospect of vacancy might scare the living daylights out of you, in which case an increase might not be a smart idea. That excellent tenancy that's going along beautifully, your property's performing, the yield's good, it's going to represent reasonable, it's not going to hurt your capital if it's sold tomorrow, then great. There's no reason to necessarily do that, because for the sake of $10 or $20, you might be, deconstructing a solid tenancy in a well-performed property. So there's a few things there you've got to be really careful of, but that's the short answer to any rent increase of any kind. For a long-term tenancy, you've got to be real careful, because what can happen with long-term tenancies where there are steady rent increases over time is rent goes like this, right, over that time, and the market might be doing this or this, So you've got rent up here, and then all of a sudden your tenant leaves, and you're sort of dropping the rent down $40 a week or whatever, because you're not actually matching the market. And worse than that, if there's a problem with the property, or you're entering an increase and the tenant says, well, hang on a minute, this is ridiculous, and contests the increase for some reason, then you won't be able to do it, and you might be pinged for it at a tribunal level, because it's not a justified increase. So it's all very much market-related stuff that you're dealing with. And your agent, the object of that question, if it's vacant tomorrow, that's really the question the law expects you to ask when it comes to increasing rent. So you're going to
that sort of answers the second part of it about how you approach it. You look at, well, what are similar properties renting for? And then it's not a subjective, well, I want to raise it $20 because I want to go to Bali on a holiday or wherever, go to Vegas. It's because the market rent is now this amount. And if you were to move out tomorrow, well, you can't. Yeah, but eventually you might be able to one of these days. But yeah, so I think that's how I approach it. I think you answered that question fantastically.
It's fantastic.
Let's wrap it up on these 2 questions. So, Co asked about if somebody, so it's like buying bulk, how much percentage PM fees would you charge? I mean, I don't know. It kind of it kind of depends.
It depends on what state. The percentage of fees vary quite differently to state, what the asset type is and where it's located. If you've got a really, really regional property, you can expect to pay 15, 20% property management fees.
Yeah, it's often. Yeah, you can do. It depends on the areas.
Mining
I've got
crazy places.
It can do, because you're looking at cash flow in the end and what each property is going to involve to actually manage on a day-to-day basis. This question alludes to the idea of, if I've got lots of properties, will there be some kind of bulk discount, right? That's that concept, right? Well, here's the thing to understand about that. 6 properties means 6 lots of every job. It actually doesn't reduce how much work that you do. It just, you've got one property, you've got 6 of them. Well, 6 times 1 is 6. That's the number of times you have to do those jobs. So the jobs don't change. The managements don't change in themselves. There's just more of them, Now, the one advantage you might say is, well, there's one point of contact. Okay, that's fine. But the management of the property exists with 6 separate tenancies, 6 separate leases, 6 separate sets of routine inspections, 6 separate ingoings, 6 separate outgoings. It's all these different things. All these things have to happen. And if that's on Torrens title too, you've got common area as well. If it's a Torrens title 6 townhouse complex, which increases the complexity of the management as well, because you've got common space, you've got different insurance requirements, you've got all these sorts of other things that might be necessary too. So I think probably, and I've spoken within my industry to agents about how to do this kind of stuff. And I think a really good agent would tell you exactly that. So you want me to do 6 times the work, but you want to reduce the amount of money that you're paying me, per that job. Is that the idea?
But by the same token, I've got 6 properties, and now you have to advertise out there and get 6 different people to give you their one property. So from an incoming perspective, from a lead, like your business trying to get 6 new tenancies, I've got 6 properties here. So that's then sorts you out. You don't have to it doesn't cost as much. But obviously that side of things is a lot cheaper than the manual task of actually managing the property. So what you're saying is, what I'm saying is there's probably a bit of potential there to move it, but maybe not. And what you're saying is there's not as much as you might think.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful with that approach, because it's not going to get you the result you're after, is what I would suggest. It's going to get you a result. Will people do bulk discounts? Of course they will. Of course they will. If you look for it, they will give it to you. But again, we go back to how to select a great property manager, don't we? And we look at what does a great property manager do? Well, a great property manager is a bit like a great person in any trade. They're not desperate for you to come and use them. They're not. Great property managers are sought after resources, like every person.
Treat a mean keeping thing, right? I mean,
so you're going to be very careful. But I think in my case, in my business, right. But the other thing to consider is that for boutique businesses like mine, I'm careful with the amount of large scale multiple property owners that I use, because it actually negatively impacts my asset because it's an increased risk. As well, and from an income point of view. So so in scale agencies, we've got 1,000 properties. Having someone who owns 10 is not a big deal. You can sort of carry that a little bit. It might be minimized to some degree, but it's not necessarily brilliant. I think you'll find a lot of property managers will tell you that large scale property owners tend to be less attentive to what they're doing. You mentioned, Joe, about going to your property room by room, and making those improvements. A lot of guys, and this is my experience, and it's a little bit subjective, that have very large portfolios and not really invested in spending that much time with them. They're looking at a balance sheet for the most part, and they're sort of saying, well, how does this weigh up? It's a numbers game in that particular process. And that's cool. There's no problem with that at all. But it can lead to a certain mindset, which leads to detachment from property, from asset, and from tenancy. And you can often end up in a situation where tenants themselves are kind of commoditized, and they're not really considered to be, properties that have a job to do in their own right. So you've got to be a little bit careful with those owners. Sometimes they can lose sight of what they've got. So they take a bit of wrangling, I will say sometimes, large scale owners, that they sometimes have to be brought back and say, well, hang on a minute, I know you haven't seen this place for 10 years, but I can tell you that your vanity you thought was new is now 5 years old, so we're going to go back and sort of do something here. So
it's funny that you say that. I remember a Smart Property Investment. What's the host there?
Phil Tarrant, mate. Jeez.
Phil Tarrant, that's it. And he was talking about he's got, I don't know, 20 properties in the portfolio that they publicly show off. And he was saying yeah, man, sorry, not yeah, man, he didn't say that, but he's like, we had a property vacant for 4 months and I didn't even know. He's like, I was just checking the paperwork and all of a sudden there was a 4-month vacancy. And I was like, oh God, I didn't know about that.
The money wasn't in the bank account. I think I remember that. It was probably, it was chatting to men's rule.
So okay, last comment. Let's wrap it up with this one.
I think the answer is no.
I don't know. I'd say yes. I'd say screw it.
Why, Joe? I mean, I don't want somebody who's not a painter.
They want to paint it. I don't care. They want to paint it. I like this. Who's gonna have the right answer here? So I want it painted. They want it. I don't care what happens. They want to paint the color. I'm happy to buy it, and that makes them happy. And then they're more invested.
Yeah,
it's easy to paint. Just make sure you give them sticky tape and drop sheets.
Sticky tape,
whatever that stuff's called, painter's tape.
A bit of cello tape,
bit of cello, a little bit of the plastic stuff.
You done much painting, Joe?
Yeah, I don't do the painting. That's what I outsource that.
I can do the painting and we do a reno, Joe.
I've never. Oh my God! I used to lay carpet. That was my first job ever, laying carpet. Not doing that ever again either. There are tasks that you outsource, but I do most of the other stuff. Don't worry. Anyway. Okay. On this issue, what would you do? Would you buy the paint and let the tenant do it, or would you get a professional do it?
Jeff versus Joe.
Well, I can tell you the reason why the PM says not to do it, because what they've said is not to do it because of insurance issues. I can see that's on its face, that's fairly astute advice, because what the PM is saying is, look, if you're getting someone to do a professional job,
I know he's a good painter. Okay, so is he like Michelangelo or?
Yeah, that's a weird statement. How do you know he's a good painter?
Do they do it for a living?
How much painting has he done?
Okay, but
he's an artist, actually.
The PM's worried about insurance because they're worried if they do something to the property and they make a mistake and they destroy something, break something, muck something up, use the wrong paint or something. I know you got to supply the paint, but they use it badly. They bugger something up. They cause some kind of permanent damage to the home that requires more money to fix. All those sorts of things. They don't have that insurance in place to cover those issues on a professional level. It can sometimes, are they going to invoice you for it? Are you going to get, is there a depreciative or a tax benefit there? Are you sort of, what are you trying to gain out of doing this? Is the net gain going to be worth it?
Saving money
involved? I mean, is it going to be, professional painters do cost a lot to be, and I've painted my own properties, plenty of, a number of times, but, and it's not fun, I'll say. And it can be done. You can do it well yourself if you're disciplined enough and you sort of understand the process. You can do it well yourself. It's not an impossible job to do, but imagine if there was a professional painter on this call, they'd be having a heart attack. But
it's funny. It just keeps going.
The next is going to be like, I don't know, who's a famous painter? I mean, famous painter, like, is this a thing? Like, I don't know, who's worked on the blog. Jamie Jury.
But this is the job of a property manager, right? To de-risk your investment. And that's exactly what he's doing here. He's saying, look, this is a risk that you are taking on. I'm not comfortable with you taking on this risk, but it's your life. Live it, baby. You do what you want to do. However, just letting you know that if the insurance comes through, if he drops the pane of he drops it all over the carpet, you're responsible for it, not him. So when push comes to shove, you're going to have to rip up the carpet and put those new floating floorboards that Nick recommended in.
Interesting that, that's right. Get rid of the carpet, honestly. But the what the guy just said there about worried about injury, okay, that's a really interesting thing, okay, because what PMs are very aware of now, acutely aware rather, is that we have some liability. We've got skin in the game here. Right. So if I'm your property manager and I advise or corroborate something that is a bad idea, that is dangerous, there's legal precedent now that exists that I have a percentage of liability. The example that's often given is the balcony that fell off a property. I think it was in the Northern Beaches somewhere, or Colorado, or something like that. There was quite a famous story because people got injured. It was a balcony literally fell off a property. And by the time it got through the court system, the agent, I think from memory, was allocated about 30% of the responsibility for what happened. And Jesus. I can tell you that terrified our industry when that happened. You know, because you know, there's this idea that people think, well, property managers don't have skin in the game. You know, we do have skin in the game. If we manage your property, this is what I mean by talking about partnership. You know, we are a manner of partner with you on this. And the reason it was liability is because the property manager went there and did what they thought was the right thing. They said, look, I think the balcony needs to be looked at. Get someone over to look at it. The ruling was something like they didn't get the right trade, or it was a civil engineer rather than a structural engineer or something like that. But it was pretty hardcore stuff. And it sort of shows you how serious it can get when people are doing jobs that they shouldn't be doing. So I think painting's not really like that, right? We've got to assess risk with common sense, Joe. And I'm kind of with you a little bit in the sense that as a property manager, if there's a pothole in the driveway and it shows the tenant wheel a car, I mean, you can go to the nth degree here if you want. The risks are endless if you keep going. So you do have to be careful to not be overwhelmingly risk averse. You just have to be careful. And painting is a fairly risk averse activity. It might be a pretty bad effort, you know, but you know, it's relative. I can see why someone may be considering it, but the PM is right. And they're just trying to help you make a good decision, you know, and they're doing their job is what I would say about that. And I don't think if I was managing that PM, I'd probably say, look, I'm not overly concerned about the risk here. It's not as high as plenty of other things. Let's just track the job closely. Let's make sure we know what's going on. Let's make sure the tenant's telling us what they're doing, you know, that sort of stuff. But
it's the sign of a good manager, right? All of a sudden they've actually laterally thinking about risk and the assessment and what it all looks like for you. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's not, and that might not be the answer this particular poster wants to hear with that stuff.
I think he's going to get it painted anyway. To be honest, I think so.
I think that's happened. That might have already happened, Joe. That might be a retrospective thing.
Just letting you know, it's already done.
So the PM's doing their job. I think that's the sort of thing you want your PM saying. You know, is sort of saying, look, there's risk here. This is the problem. Here's the pro. Here's the con. I think on mess here, that's the thing, and that should be all the discussions you have with your PM. You know. Where's the risk? What's the go? How's it going to benefit me if I do this? What's the, you know, and make an educated decision. And if you're not happy as a landlord with the answer, ask why. Why do you think that? Expand on that for me, because I'm not understanding, you know? And they should be able to expand. That's what the professionals do.
100%.
Yeah, we're at the 2-hour mark, gents. So I think I think risk is the thing we'll finish off on there. And there was one more question about self. We spoke about the self-management versus managing yourself.
We already covered that off. Nick, thank you very much for taking so much time to run through all of this. Property managers are one of those secret weapons that I think smart and intelligent, sophisticated investors use to their advantage, and some investors do not, to their own peril. Like, there's so much value in using a property manager, not just from what you guys do, but also from the knowledge and experience you have. So thank you for sharing so much of yours in this 2 hours.
My pleasure. I get a huge kick out of it. It's great. If someone wants advice, I mean, you know, flick me a message. I you know, if I can help.
On that, what's the best way for people to reach out to you aside from flicking you a message? Is there a website, or what's the best?
Yeah, you can call me directly if you want. I mean, just do it like people normally do, like with phones and, you know, messages and things.
Not that we
I'm happy to do it on my details there, so you can.
So what's the business name and where do you service? Because we're talking about property managers all over Australia, but what's your kind of area, and give us a run through of the business?
Sure. Look, I run my business in Sydney, so I cover most of Sydney really. I've you know, got properties in all over the place. I do have a lot in Western Sydney. I've got a few in the inner part of Sydney and CBD as well. But my particular company is on Facebook there. Corona Sync Knows Property, it's called. So you'll sort of see that pretty quickly if you want. But I mean, I have people messaging me on sort of Messenger all the time, and honestly, it's a privilege to be asked. Like it's a real, you know, I'll answer as best I can and help you in every way I can help. I mean, it's such a privilege to be asked for help. But I'm happy to do it, mate. I really love doing it. So if I can give any value at all, I'll give it to you if I can. So it's a real. You know, it's a privilege to be asked for help. I mean, why wouldn't I help? You know, I don't mind where you are or what you're doing. A lot of these techniques work regardless of where you are in the country, but legislation is different in every state. So keep that in mind. But please reach out and you know, if you're confused about anything that's been said tonight or anything like that, I mean, you know, a lot of this advice is best off done very specifically for you. So by all means.
That's very true. Very true. Awesome. Okay, cool. Is there anything else you guys wanted to cover off?
I got something, Joe, and I haven't checked this before, so I hope you're okay. But we have a sexy little YouTube channel that we're kicking off, and all these lives are going to be on YouTube. So check it out there if you want to watch something. If you want to watch it back or watch it in 2x speed or whatever. Because I love watching stuff in 1.5 speed. You can't do that on Facebook, but you can on YouTube. So subscribe.
Very good point. It's a very good point. It's definitely not sexy YouTube channel. It is just these Facebook lives put on here so you can watch them a little bit faster, because I know
Speak for yourself, Joe. I mean, we've got two of the up and coming. We've got all the amazing guests we've had so far. So.
Actually, if everyone could just go to the Facebook channel and subscribe, so we can double our audience. Right now we have 16. Jeff, is
18, Joe. It's 18. So
18. So if 18, how many people are on this live? Could everyone please go to that and just double it, just so we can say we doubled our YouTube audience in 20 minutes. No.
Yeah. But go and have a chat to Nick as well. He really knows his stuff. He's been in the group. I feel like he's more than part of the furniture, whatever that is. He's a legend of property management and one of the few guys who keeps adding value across multiple groups. So go and have a chat to him.
And thanks for having me too, by the way, guys. It's been a privilege, and it's a privilege to be asked to be here and talk about it. So it's
thanks, Nick, as well, mate. Love your work. Share it with all your friends and family. Let's pump it up. Let's get to 100.
Let's do it. Let's do it, guys. Okay, great. Well, let's wrap it up. Thank you, everyone. Let's go buy a property. See you later.
Thank you, guys.